Hi everybody, for the second segment here we're going to be talking about budgeting, and it's really the foundation of all financial management. And so as we start to consider, love to start with the profits. And so we'll first read a quote from Brother N. Eldon Tanner. He taught this principle: develop and live within a budget. Many people think a budget robs them of the freedom. On the contrary, successful people have learned that a budget makes real economic freedom possible. So simply put, having a budget is a commandment, and when we're obedient to commandments, we invite the Spirit into our lives, and we really invite divine help into our lives. And so it's a principle if we're obedient to can help us. I find that a budget is simply creating a plan. Our Heavenly Father has a plan of salvation, and that helps us navigate. We're going to veer here and there off of it, but we see where we're going. And as a family and as a couple, if we have a plan on where we've been, and we can look forward to where we're going, then we can start to work on what we need to right now to get us where we want to go. So I think it's important to note on a budget, a lot of people just look at where their money went, but a budget is telling your money where to go. And it's empowering. It gives you courage because you can determine where your funds need to go as they're coming in, and you can also create strategies and plans on funds that you need to obtain. And so it's an exciting process to go through. It really allows you to live an on-purpose life rather than an on-accident life. A lot of people think that it provides more freedom not to have to sit down and go through it, or perhaps it eliminates contention sometimes in the marriages. I've seen that. People have told me that, I don't want to do a budget because it's a point of contention. Well, in reality, it's going to lead to more contention if we don't sit down and work together on that and address where the plans are going. It's not going to fix itself. So, some foundational principles of budgeting I'll start with. As I mentioned, a budget is telling your money where to go, and that's an important part to look at. Share a story of one of my friends recently shared with me. It was a story of one of his best friends, and he had a great relationship with his grandfather. His grandfather made an effort to be at all of his games, and throughout his life had just really been really influential. And remembers getting the phone call that his grandfather was passing away, and he went racing up to Pocatello where his grandfather was, and got to spend a few minutes with him before he passed away. And as he was gathered there, his grandfather had some one-on-one time and said, "I want to share with you the secret of life." And he thought, wow, this is great. I'm going to hear the secret of life. My friend shared with me, this is what his grandfather told him, and I found so much truth in it. The hardest things will always be the easiest, and the easiest things will always turn out to be the hardest. And I think that applies into this budgeting principle. If we'll do something that's considered hard, address the current reality, and start to look at where we're currently at and where we want to go, life will become easier, the process will become easier, because we're telling our money where to go, and we're actually getting to where we want to go, which is really a place of financial freedom, so we can live out our dreams. Another one that I teach to my kids nonstop, they hear it from me almost daily. The good news is whatever we focus on, the bad news is whatever we focus on also expands. And so I love that principle that whatever we focus on expands. And if you're looking at your budget, you're focused on it, you're trying to manage your money, I promise you there will be resources that you didn't see before come about. You'll think of more creative ways to be able to manage your expenses, better ways to be able to find income. And if you're choosing not to focus on it, other things will expand. And typically it's all the things that the neighbors may have, what someone else may be doing on a vacation. Those big things begin to expand, and we start to focus more on that, and often it leads to poor financial management decisions. And so just a couple of principles that I share as I get into budgeting. So the first step, the important part is to assess our current reality. Wherever we're at and where we're trying to decide where to go and setting goals, we have to assess our current reality. And so step one as we start a budget is to gather our income. If you're on a salary, that's pretty easy to do. Simply just grab your W-2 and see how much you made for the year or your last pay stub. Let's say that you've got bonuses or commissions involved in that, I would pull out whatever the base wage is. You can use that as a monthly amount, but any bonus or overtime, any of those types of numbers, I would take for the last 2 years. Take that bonus amount. Let's say you got $5,000 bonus one year and $10,000 bonus the other one. Take that and divide that by 24 months to come up with an average bonus amount, because it's not uncommon that bonuses and commissions are coming every single month and they're a consistent amount. So get more of an average to use there. A lot of people I know are self-employed. This is one that they wonder, how do I get bearings on how much I'm making? Two things you can do. One, you can get your bank statements and check your deposits for the last 12 months. That's a great way to go about it. Another one I think is to look at your last 2 years of tax returns and look at your net income. You can add back in your depreciation. We know that's a paper loss, but really go through and be prudent as you look at the income that's there. I wouldn't go off your gross income because typically if you're self-employed, you do have expenses to help drive and generate that income. And so take off whatever those business expenses may be real and try and get a number there. But do a 2-year average once again. Every month, kind of doing this. And so if you'll take a 2-year average and look for the trend. If you're trending down, I'd use a 12-month average. And then I would begin to look at it and see if you see things on the horizon in your budget, particularly your income that may be changing and adjust accordingly. And then if you're finding that sometimes when I've gone through budgets with people, their expenses really are managed down and they're doing a great job on the expense component. Sometimes the answer is you need more income. And that's a different challenge. Once again, it's one I think that can be discouraging for those trying to earn and provide for a family if their skill set isn't equal to what's required to meet the minimum needs of the family. And so if you find yourself in that situation, once again, those self-reliance classes that are going on throughout the state, find one, join one. You'll find great other peers and mentors throughout in those groups that are working together with the same goals of trying to improve their education, improve their skill set, find better ways to network, and perhaps even start your own business. And so look at those as options. The next one is the expense component. So once again, this is important to assess your current reality. So in gathering all of your expenses, this won't take very long, I promise. But it will be very, very insightful. So what I would encourage you to do is get your last 12 months worth of bank statements. If you use credit cards, I would encourage you to get your last 12 months worth of credit card statements. Anywhere you've got money going out, let's say you use cash, be real, put it into these categories, and then what you're going to do is you're going to go and break it out. I gave a simple example. Let's say that you've got a category for your gas budget. So what I want you to do is as you go throughout your January bank statement, go in and actually look in the month of January, all the allocations that went to gas added up. So say for example, it was $250 in the month of January. That's what it'd be. You get the idea for February, March. On this 3-month average, it would be $275, but I would create an entire year worth. And that'll become more evident in this miscellaneous category. That's sometimes I call it the Walmart fund or the Target fund, just of random things that you really aren't planning on. The other things that are gonna go into those types of categories, Christmas. Christmas is not an emergency. It comes up every year. Birthdays are not an emergency. A lot of times we tend to go into emergency funds for those types of things. Car repair, all those types of things. If you get a year's worth of expenses, you'll get a pretty good feel for where your money's going. And so go and put those in those categories and then divide it out. The reason that becomes important is because when you're going to put your expenses down, most of the time we'll look at it and we try and do an exercise on paper where our expenses are the minimum possible. But when we can get real and see where the money's going, what we did spend on birthdays, what we spent on vacation, if that's important to you and your family, and wholesome family activities, then make a line item for it. Make sure that it's scheduled, that it's planned. I encourage you to be putting savings in there, put your tithing in there. Be proactive and intentional and put that out and then create those categories. But if you'll take that over a 12-month period, that then becomes the number that you're using in your expense categories to prepare for the month. As you sit down and have perhaps a weekly or a family council at the first of the month especially, maybe there are some extraordinary things coming this month that you're aware of that is out of the ordinary. Adjust that expense item for that month if you need to, but the hope is that that's capturing on average what's going on. Then as you begin to move through the months, you may find, back to this example, if you were putting $275 into your gas budget for the month, well, in January you would have had $25 left over in that budget. Don't spend it on the movies. That's got to roll forward because on average, you know what, next month we're going to run a little bit short and this budget will start to work itself out. And so that's the hard part of budgets, is life is not stagnant. It's constantly moving and there's constantly things going on. And so I hope that tool helps you on getting a baseline. But do this together, create accountability. This isn't a time to argue and look at it and say, man, I've been eating macaroni and cheese at home and you're going out and having lunch every day at work type scenario. That doesn't help the problem. But it's important that you're real as you look at everything, be accountable to one another and put that into those numbers, because if you get a great number and baseline, then you've got something to courageously and confidently work on. I found if you're holding something back and dragging on it, it's still a point of contention because you're wondering, not if it's going to come up, it's when it comes up, because it's not going to come out in the numbers. And so just get it all out there, love one another, and start to work through it. Hopefully that helps on the budgeting piece on the expense. So next item is be proactive when you're planning and looking at items to save for. Look at your emergency fund. Do you have 3 to 6 months worth of expenses saved up? How much money needs to be going in there? You may not get it all in 1 month, but make sure that it's an intentional category. If your emergency savings is dropped, make sure that you're putting that money aside. The further you look into the future, the easier it's going to be. So, for example, we don't always have to take out car loans. If we're looking at saying our car is 4 or 5 years old and starting to get a lot of maintenance on it, are we proactively setting aside what a car payment would be into our savings so that we're earning the interest rather than taking a car loan out and the bank making the interest? So just be looking ahead. The next principle is balance your budget to zero. Once you've got your income, you've got your expenses, that's where you're going down. And if at the end of the, when you get through that process and you're beginning to tell your money where to go, the goal is to balance that to zero. If you have extra money, and extra income, your expenses have outpaced it, that's an awesome problem to have. Well, begin to tell that where to go. Perhaps you're putting more than the minimum into your retirement plan. If you got other debt, be paying that, using that extra amount to put into the other debt. But balance it to zero. Look at your necessities first, your wants second. And as I mentioned, any excess goes to debt reduction. Don't rob from an annualized category. Once again, if you're running short at the end of the month, be very, very cautious if you always take from your Christmas budget, because Christmas isn't for several months away. You want to make sure that you're putting money aside so that you don't create an unintended emergency down the road. You can use different sources like an envelope system. Sometimes that works well for people to take the actual cash and put it in there. When it's gone, it's gone. And there's great videos under the self-reliance section of the Gospel Library app. There's one that does a great job on how to set up a cash budget or an envelope system. But look for that. There's really no need, really, if you have a budget put together, to carry a credit card. One of the things that I find challenging, this one's a little bit difficult for some folks to wrap their minds around, but one of the ways that you can look at it if you know you're living beyond your means is a simple principle. If you carry a credit card balance that cannot be paid off every month, it's a strong indicator you're living beyond your means and that budget is out of check. I'll often have people that come and meet with me looking to refinance their mortgage and consolidate everything together, and they're wondering, I just can't figure out how much I'm running behind. Well, let's say, for example, I saw them 3 years ago and they now have $30,000 in credit card debt. It's a pretty simple calculation to look at it and say, hey, 3 years, $30,000, they're about $10,000 a year. You can break that down to a monthly basis. And you got a pretty good idea of the cash flow you're trying to free up. But more importantly, how much cash is out of whack on the budget, how much more income might need to be made, or how much other expenses may need to be cut out of a budget to be sustainable. And that can give you courage. Sometimes that's scary to address, but if you know what that number is, you can then actively start to work on it. You're not reactive when everything's crashing down and you ran out of credit limits. You're actively moving ahead and feeling the accomplishment and the success of being on point with the budget. So one other thing that I would throw out is be consistent. Businesses look at their budgets all throughout the month. When you start out, you may need to meet almost daily as you're trying to create accountability with a spouse. You'll get better at it. And perhaps that goes to once a week. That may move to a couple times a month and then to monthly. But it's a process that you're going to go through. And one of the most important parts I think I'll touch on here with the budget, and this is the fun part, everybody loves to spend money. And so once you get your paycheck, you know where your money needs to go, spend it. That's the fun part. There's no reason you shouldn't have spent it in an hour. If you're telling your money where to go, it'll be spent into those categories. And at that point, you remove the temptation just to think about, I'm going to get to it later. Maybe it won't come. Because when the money's gone, when fun things in life pop up that are easy to look at and say, let's go do it today, we'll get to it later, that temptation goes down to be ignoring those types of things. So, next principles, do something. Make sure that it's a written budget. And so that you can go actually on to section 22 of the General Church Handbook of Instructions. There you can find the self-reliance form. I'll attach it to the email as well. But that's a great resource. You can go through and fill it out. Very well done. And you can see exactly where your cash is at. write it on paper. Use an Excel spreadsheet. You can use Quicken. There's lots of online tools and different things that you can use. The important part is do something and find something that works for you. Make it simple. Make it easy. For me, it's easiest to write down on a yellow notepad. I can blast through it. I know where our number's at. I know where our money's going, where it's coming from. And for me, that works. Others like to be able to have the spreadsheets. Doesn't really matter what it is. Try it. If it doesn't work, don't lose hope. Try something different and keep moving ahead as a couple. So the principle of educate yourself. Find good books to read. I threw a couple of ones in here that I think, especially on the debt management side and teaching children how to use finances. There's two of them there, Total Money Makeover and Smart Money, Smart Kids. One of the reasons I like Dave Ramsey's material is he is faith-based. He's looking at eternal principles from prophets in the Old and New Testament, trying to find what are enduring principles that teach the character of money, as well as the basic foundations of staying out of debt and investing, the law of the harvest, those types of principles. So the providentliving.org website is a great resource that you can get from the church. So you can go there. Budget worksheets, debt and savings calculators. As you're studying and reading lots of different books, YouTube's filled with it. I love YouTube. Take 10 minutes every morning and just find a financial series and be listening to it. But the important key is always check it against what the prophets have said. If you'll do that, you'll find safety. Some things you may have to rule out, even though they're a great idea in theory. Have the courage to rule them out and trust, because if those principles fit with the prophets, then I would move forward with it. Another principle there that the budget is cycle and non-event. So as I mentioned already, be patient with yourself. Review it often. Go over it. Make changes throughout the month as you're going about it. If you have things pop up, figure out how you're going to have to adjust a different category if one gets out of whack. So, but a couple other quick principles is plan for your emergency fund and your retirement savings. I'm encouraging that that's a line item. It will not magically appear. We learn of the law of the harvest. We reap what we sow. If you want to be able to have financial freedom, be able to go and enjoy the later years and have a house to live in, if you want to travel, if you want to serve a mission, whatever those items that may be inspiring to you, perhaps you want to pay for your kids, your grandchildren's education, perhaps you want to be able to make the down payment on their first home, whatever that may be to you, plan for it and put it in as a budget item and make sure that it's set aside every month, because that law of the harvest isn't going to return something that was never planted. Next principle, if you find that your budget's running upside down a little bit, some ideas on how you might adjust your budget. So one principle is there's no get out of debt quick scheme. It's similar to repentance. It's difficult and it's there to change our character. There's not a magic wand that waves and we consolidate everything together magically and somehow it disappeared. $1 of debt is $1 of debt and it has to be paid off. So a couple things you can look at is check your tax exemptions. I would talk to a licensed CPA before you make these types of changes. If you're getting back $9,000 to $10,000 every year on your tax return and call that a savings account, that you're turning around and paying off all your credit card debt, that is not a budget. And that is not a financial plan. Adjust your deductions down so that you're not having so much taken out of your taxes. But the reason I encourage you to talk to a licensed CPA is that you don't adjust it too low to where now you're having to write a check at the end of the year because you kept all your money that should have been going for taxes. So I just share that as one principle. Check your insurance deductibles. If you've got savings, and I put a big if there, be wise. Perhaps you can, if you've got savings, you can adjust your insurance deductibles up a little bit, and that can drop some insurance premiums. You may find, this is the power of a budget, and this is the proactive part. You may find that, let's say you've got 3 cars, and your budget's upside down by $300, and you have a $300 car payment. That gives you the courage to look at it and say, this is not going to lead to a different end. Let's sell the car now. The longer you hold on a negative budget, the worse the problem is going to get. And so the budget can provide clarity and plan as you start to look at places to cut. So I put on there, it may come down to selling a home. Perhaps you're over leveraged. Maybe you bought too much of a home. Those are courageous things, once again, that I think having a budget you can start to look at and create a strategy and a plan of what's right for you guys. As you get your plan together, I encourage you to share it with someone. If you're really struggling trying to get the numbers to work, share it with a loved one. Share it with a family member. But that can create some accountability. It'll also create people looking at it that love and care for you. And may be able to help know a lot of our money problems come from our character and our desires and the things that we want to spend things on. Having loved ones help us through that can be really empowering. Let's say that your family goes on, as an extended family, on a lot of vacations. If your budget can't support that and the travel expenses, have that discussion with them, because that may be something that needs to change. They may be unintentionally putting burdens on you that they didn't even realize because they didn't know what was going on there. One other principle there is cash out refinancing, credit cards, and vehicle loans only mask the underlying problem. Once again, a dollar debt is a dollar debt. I find so many people that are looking just to consolidate their debt together. They don't shorten the term on their debt to pay it off faster as they're doing that. They're just extending it out and pulling the equity out of a home, thinking that their budget's actually balanced. This is a dangerous cycle, and when we get into a flattening real estate market or a little bit of a downturn, and all markets go up and down, they always will. That's when we run into real hard economic times, because we find out, wait a minute, I have been living beyond my means. There's not a way to get out of it. So a couple other points that I would throw out is the principle of tithing, if I can, real quick. Sometimes we look at it and say, man, maybe tithing doesn't fit. Please review as a family the principles and the blessings of paying tithing. I know that tithing blesses our lives. From a professional standpoint, pretty much every noteworthy financial advisor has found that giving at least 10% of your income to a charity is a signature trait of those with great wealth of financial success. Interesting side note, but for us, the Lord has commanded to pay 10% tithing, and for that, He promises us great blessings, that the windows of heaven will be opened. Sometimes that's knowledge. Sometimes that's encouragement. Sometimes that's the spirit and faith, that we understand who we are and we get the courage to take one more step. I also find it interesting. The book of Helaman teaches something interesting. In the book of Malachi, it teaches that those that don't pay our tithing, there's a curse. Often we don't talk about that. And I've had a unique experience. I've worked with bishops for several years. Often when they've had a member that's been struggling trying to get their budget in order, and it's now getting beyond their capacity to really understand how to help them, they often refer them to me to help. And I found something interesting. There were some robbers spoken of in the book of Helaman. Gadian is who they were, but the Lord spoke about robbers and a curse. And I find this interesting. The Gadian robbers said that as they put their money down, or they put their weapons down, or whatever they had, their precious things, that they became slippery. And they turned around and they were lost. I can't tell you how many people I've sat down with that have thrown their budgets in front of me and said, we don't know where the money's going. It became slippery. I believe one of the blessings of paying tithing is that we actually gain control, and we can see clearly where things are at, and we can gain the faith and the confidence to do hard things. The hardest things will always turn out to be the easiest. And doing the easiest thing of moving some of those things out of our lives, what we see as a short-term fix, will always end up to be the hardest. So I hope those principles help, and you can do it. I encourage you to start today. Sit down, put your budget together, and start the path forward.